We're getting a free 5-star weapon selector, and not every 5-star weapon is created equally. Some are just bigger stat stakes, while others add way more value by buffing more stats, changing rotations, or even making the character play differently. So in this video, I'm going to break down what actually makes a 5-star weapon good, which weapons are worth the selector, which ones you should probably skip, and what I will personally pick for my own account. The goal is simple: help you spend the selector on the weapon that gives you the most value, not just the one that looks good on paper. So let me begin by asking a question. What makes a 5-star weapon good? A good 5-star weapon isn't just more numbers. They also need to buff more variety of stats. For example, if you look at some Mogo's weapon, the 4-star weapon buffs are not attack and buffs are only healing, which are not really useful, honestly, when it comes to doing more damage for DPS. Now if you look at the 5-star weapon, it still has the healing, and the attack stat, you can treat it as getting converted into skill damage increase, which it does more damage, and she also heals even more. So you can just compare the numbers here. It's 40+% compared to 24%, that's already increased. But what makes this weapon good is that it also increased target damage taken by 8.5 times 2, so that is 17% damage taken increase. And it also decreased defense and ailment resistance. So compared to the 4-star weapon, this 5-star weapon buffs more stuff, or debuff more stuff, which makes the weapon pretty good. The second thing you want to look out for, especially for DPS weapon, is crit rate and crit damage. These two are very important stats for you, DPS to do big damage, and more importantly, crit damage. And that is also why Akechi and Kasumi's weapons are probably the best 5-star DPS weapon in the game, because both of them buff crit damage. Akechi buffs 30% crit damage, and Kasumi buffs 36.3%. Their weapons are really good, and their overall damage and overall score increased by 20%, which is very high. For reference, the other DPS weapons are usually around 15%. The weaker, or the older DPS characters is only like 10%. So 20% is a huge chunk. The third thing you want to look out for is stat requirement. Some characters require a specific threshold to reach to fully activate their kit. For example, Turbo's weapon gives her speed, helps her reach the cap. Matoi's weapon also helps you reach the ailment accuracy cap easier. So weapons that make it easy to reach cap are generally very useful. It also makes your life easier to chase a bit less on the substats. The final thing you want to look out for to see whether a 5-star weapon is good is how they change a character's playstyle or change the rotation. An example here is Phoebe's weapon. Phoebe's weapon reduces cooldown by 1 every time you get 2 cocktails. Allows you to use a skill faster, sooner, which pretty much changes the rotation and makes her better. With that out of the way, let's start ranking them. The first tier, we're gonna call it Do Not the Standard. These characters are standard. Like, if they're standard, why even pick them? You can get their weapon from losing 50/50s. You can get them with 10 elemental coins from the EY shop. There's no reason to take them at all. But I strongly advise you against picking the weapon. So standard characters in the game right now, we have Marion, Phoebe, Ann, Ryuji, Riddle, Rin, Morgana. That's 7. It's quite a lot actually. That only leaves us with like 5 more. So next tier, we're gonna call it Standard Future. These 3 characters are going to the standard in the future. Still a while, maybe like 1 year, but they are going to standard. And those are Fox, Joker, and Yui. Since they're coming to standard, you can maybe wait for them to drop your standard, then you can pick it up with 10 elemental coins on the shop, or you can lose 50/50 as well. But that is still quite far away. But let me quickly go through the weapons. So I'll just go through by release. Joker. So Joker's 4-star weapon is just attack and attack, just attack buff. So the 5-star weapon is nice because not only does it retain the attack buff, you also get the damage buff. So this is 30% damage, curse damage, and then another 23% damage when you have more than 3 with a rebellion stack. So that is 53% damage and 30% attack, which is overall improvement. Like, a lot of the other older weapons are not that good anymore. The next character is Yui, and Yui is very interesting. If I'm not wrong, I think her 4-star weapon is the only 4-star weapon that buffs crit rate, which is pretty damn good for a 4-star weapon. And then not only that, it also buffs electric damage for 1 turn up to 2 times. So that is 36.8% damage and 30.9% crit rate. And the 5-star weapon only improves this by a little bit. 18.1, that's only like 4% increase. Rock attack 26, that's 52 compared to like 36 or something. That's not really a big increase. So the weapon is not a big improvement. And like I said just now, when I was talking about how to see good weapon, they buff the exact same stat. Hit rate damage, doesn't buff any extra new stat. So it's just the same one. And the final one we have Fox. So Fox's weapon, the 4-star increase defense and increase ice damage, 28%, including the 2 stacks. The 5-star weapon also increase defense, also increase the damage, both counter attack damage. So it's 60% counter attack damage total compared to 28. So it is like double the damage. They buff the same thing, defense and damage. But still, I think overall this is a good improvement, mainly because it's quite a big jump in number. And then you can take a quick look at the future tier list from the other servers. Fox is T0.5, Joker is T2, Yui is T3. So Joker and Yui isn't really gonna improve much in the future, I guess. Fox is gonna improve a lot with the Manscape core. Just something to consider. So I think Fox's weapon overall is the most worthy weapon to take, I guess. But again, coming to standard soon, you can lose 50-50 to them. That leaves with 2 more tiers. And the second tier is just DPS. I don't know what to name this because it's only one character, and it's Queen. Queen is a tier above the other 3 because she's not coming to standard, or at least not confirmed yet. So her value is higher. And she's also like a generally better DPS than the 3 of them. I mean, Queen is just straight up better than Yui as an assassin. So the 4-star weapon increase attack and damage. So this is like the 24% attack, like 40% damage, because it gets stack 5 tenacity stacks. Then the 5-star weapon also increases damage, increases attack also, but this one increases skill damage. Skill damage is a little bit different. So damage and skill damage and crit damage, these 3 things are in different spots in the damage calculation. So that means skill damage is like a different extra buff. It's different from damage, and it's also a really good buff. Skill damage 10% up to 60%. Skill damage basically just buffs your multiplier. So for example, this is 260, it becomes 270, which is a very strong buff. So the 5-star weapon for Queen is actually a pretty good one. And a bonus point is that the 4-star weapon looks pretty damn ugly. Well, probably the worst looking weapon in the game. So upgrading to the 5-star weapon makes it less of an eyesore to stare. But there is, I guess, a small catch to this weapon because of how it works. This part here only activates when you activate Crash Out. But let me use the rotation to explain this. So here's an example rotation. I don't remember why or what this is for. I put Phoebe here for some reason, but I'm just using this for explanation, okay? So Crash Out turns 2 and 5, and the weapon only activates when you crash out the first time. Not only one time or better, but like the first time. So Crash Out lasts for 2 turns, right? If you use Crash Out on turn 2, it will last until turn 3. But the 60% skill damage buff I talked about only works on the first Crash Out. So it only activates on turns 2 and turns 5. Turn 6 and turn 3 don't get the 60% skill damage. So that's a little bit of a small downside for the weapon. And it just kind of sucks, especially for this turn, because the big damage turn is always on the last turn, right? Maybe like let's say Futaba, maybe the Capo from Anj. But the big damage from Queen herself is on this turn. So it's a little bit awkward. It's just some extra thing about Queen, I guess. It's still a good weapon overall because 60% skill damage increase is a pretty good number. It's just that it doesn't activate all the time. If you want to get a weapon, not a bad choice to take. And that leaves the final tier. I think everybody saw this coming, honestly. The final tier is Cold Pro. I mean, it's freaking Cold Pro. Still one of the best supports in the game. Cold's weapon, arguably one of the best. Maybe the best. It's very, very good. A big reason is it changes how you play. Not how you play her, but how you play the entire fight. The weapon is the most impactful weapon in the game. But the 4-star weapon is just attack buff, and these attack buffs are for herself, so it's not really useful. The 5-star weapon though, it increases on attack, of course, makes you easier to hit the cap. The most important part of the kit, this one. Fill your highlight gauge by 40% at the start of battle. It allows you to highlight earlier. On top of that, it increases Core Star's attack by 15%, which is the character that you use Q2 on. It increases by 5% more every time you use highlight, up to 3 stacks, so up to a total of 30% attack for your DPS. Now let me try and explain why the weapon is good. But here is an example rotation. With Core's 5-star weapon, you can highlight actually here. You can highlight the first turn of the 4th faction. Usually, with Trust and Prosperity, you can only highlight here. But when you use Kasumi, for example, you want to highlight here. So with Core's 5-star weapon, you can highlight here without Trust and Prosperity. So you can run Creation Reconciliation for Core. But that's like 4% extra damage. It's a small buff, but it's still a buff. This is not the most impactful part. The most impactful part is when you need to highlight here. And it really changes the rotation. because even with Trust and Prosperity, you cannot highlight here without Court's 5-star weapon. So here's a very specific rotation for End only, Nexus of Dreams. This one, I have to, or I guess recommended, or maybe the better word is, this is like a very optimized rotation where I use a Jigokuten highlight here, because Jigokuten highlight can activate his overclock and buff attack for some reason. So I use it here, it will last until here, because Kasui moves to in action, so I cannot do this without Court's 5-star weapon. I need the 5-star weapon to do this. If not, I can only highlight here with Trust and Prosperity, which will pretty much screw up my entire highlight rotation. Because I need to highlight here, because Court. I cannot highlight here because I need a buff here, right? Court skill 3, I need a buff here, so I need to highlight here. If I highlight a bit late, I will lose a lot of buff. I will lose a lot of damage. So the 5-star weapon Court gives you flexibility in the highlight rotation. This is very, I would say, advanced to, you know, sync the highlight and stuff. Because I use Jigokuten highlight here, I can use it again here for even more buff for the last turn, which is also a big damage turn. I understand I think most of you guys don't care about this. There's this high level optimization, which is fair. However, I have another point which is catered more towards casuals. If you can highlight on the first section, it means that you can farm stuff quicker. Let's say you go to the repression stage or something, play auto, right? Usually, if you're the Court 5-star weapon, you can highlight early. That means the auto AI will use the DPS highlight early and end the fight earlier. I actually always use Court for farming because of that reason. It allows me to use the highlight earlier, allows me to end the fight earlier, and it will save my time. So extra quality of life stuff on top of the very useful highlight changes and manipulation. Very recommended to get the weapon. Now what about me? What would I pick? So here's some context, don't have Yui, so that is out of the question. I have 5-star weapon for Queen, Court, Joker. I don't have 5-star weapon for Fox. So obviously standard I will not pick at all. So which weapon would I pick? I would actually pick Court's weapon again. I will get the weapon to R1. But before I explain why, just a very important reminder. When you dupe a weapon, you dupe it from the even number to the odd number. So from R0 to R1, or R2 to R3, R4 to R5. Because when you dupe it from odd to even, you can use a standard weapon to dupe. You do not use a limited weapon there. So to easily see this, or if you forget, you just go into the forge section, you click on the plus button, whatever. If you see there's a lot of weapons there, it means that you can just use a standard weapon. Don't use a limited weapon. Because, you know, limited weapons are very limited. They are rare, expensive. Make sure you don't accidentally use it. You can just use a standard weapon to dupe instead. Now time to explain why I chose R1 Court. First of all, she's a support. I generally just value supports more. And the R1 also buffs a bit more attack here, which is nice, not a lot, a bit more. It also buffs the highlight gauge. So do not care about a team, okay? The point isn't a team, the point is a highlight explanation. I'm using the same rotation just now, but ignore that. Just look at the highlight. This is a typical highlight rotation. This zigzag pattern. With Court 5-star weapon at R0, you can highlight here. So for faction, R1 you can highlight here, R3 you can highlight here, R5 you can highlight on the very first section. So if I pick R1, that means I can highlight here. So Court's R1 allows you to highlight this section, which does allow you to squeeze in 5 highlight rotation. So you can highlight here and highlight here. It allows you to do 5 highlights in 6 turns. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility in the highlight rotation. And it allows you to maybe manipulate a little bit. It also really depends, because if you Court highlight here, you can only Court highlight here. Because to use the character highlight again, it requires 4 actions, excluding the turn you use it on. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, then you can use Court highlight again. But for some rotations, you probably don't even want to use Court highlight here. You might want to highlight here instead. It's a little bit like complicated stuff, you need to like mess around stuff, but having R1 gives you a little bit more flexibility. Because you can highlight 1 action earlier, so all your highlights can be 1 action earlier as well. It gives you a bit more wiggle room to use the highlight. That is all for the video. Feel free to let me know what weapon you are going to pick up from the selector. Or if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'll try my best to answer them. Thanks for watching.